welcome to a special episode of the Knitted by Whitney podcast. If you are new here, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. It really means a lot to me that you're continuing to watch my podcast or that you've discovered it for the first time. It just warms my heart so much to see all of your likes and comments and to reply back to you. And I'm just very, very thankful that I have such a wonderful following. This is not going to be a regular podcast episode. This is going to be a bit of a special episode. I won't be talking about my latest knitting project. As you can see, I'm not wearing anything knitted right now. Also, it's very, very hot. It's about mid-August right now, and it is about 30 degrees Celsius outside with a bit of a humidex, so it feels very, very warm. And of course, it's very, very sunny. It's summer. What can we do? This is going to be an episode about dyeing yarn. One of my hobbies, in addition to knitting, is dyeing yarn. I got into it a few years ago because I found this really, really, really awesome YouTuber named ChemKnits. And of course, it's run by a woman named Rebecca, who has a background in science and also loves to knit and loves yarn. So she started to do a lot of dyeing experiments and she posted them on her YouTube channel, which of course I will link below in the show notes. And I really loved watching Rebecca's videos because she used all non-toxic dyes. And when I was getting started with dyeing yarn, I didn't want to use chemical dyes. I was a little too nervous about them. Mostly because I was going to be doing them in my own home, in my kitchen, and I just wasn't prepared to get right into that. But Rebecca used common household items. I was intrigued because she used food coloring and it looked really, really fun. So I went and got myself some plain yarn and I got some of the products that she used and I tried my own experiments and I loved it. I think the very first thing that I used was the liquid food coloring, and although that was really, really fun to play with, it only gives a light color. You can never get a very deep color with it. So she recommended using the gel food colorings that you use for icing and whatnot. So that was my second dyeing experiment, and oh my goodness, that was fun. I just had a ball, and it was really easy and it was safe. So that's kind of how I got into dyeing yarn, and of course I only ever used readily available predominantly wool yarn. So one of the things that you need to think about when you're dyeing yarn is the material. What's the fiber? For example, I primarily used wool, which is an animal fiber, which is very easy to dye, and I subsequently have a lot of hand dyed wool yarn in my stash. And this particular summer past, I've been dipping my toe into plant-based fibers. So I'm now experimenting with using dyeing techniques on plant-based fibers, which is a different ball game, one that I've had a bit of a learning curve with certain ones. I had a very detangled bamboo yarn hank, which took a lot of TLC to clean up, but it was worth it in the end because I made my beautiful red botanical tea, which I can pop a picture of right here, and the color turned out amazing. And that was my first time dyeing plant-based fibers. But it's not going to be the last. I know it's trickier, but it's something that I want to get into because I do have a lack of plant-based yarns in my stash. Anyway, one of the things that I've also been dipping my toe into and experimenting with and starting to research and learn about are plant-based dyes. And this feeds into one of my books I'm going to talk about this episode. And that book, I'm going to talk about it now because it's relative to the podcast episode. It is called Natural Color by Sasha Dewar. I hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I apologize. I will link this book below. This book I first got from the library. It's a very good introduction to plant-based dyeing. I know a lot of people also have a favorite one. I think it's The Modern Natural Dyer. I think it's that one. I don't remember the author's name, but I will link it below. A lot of people go to that book first as their introduction to plant-based dyeing and using natural dyeing items. But this is the one that I started with because I saw it at my library and it was available, so I picked it up right away, and I have since bought my own copy. I do like the Modern Natural Dyer, but this one sort of spoke to me because it was the first one that I found. And it doesn't have recipes for all the items that I want to use, but it is a great one that I'm going to start with. I first tried natural dyeing as part of a class. I did a virtual class with Gabriella from Gabriella Makes. She's Gabriella Makes on Instagram. I think her website is Hello Gabriella. I will link all of this below. Anyway, I did a dyeing class with her using avocado pits and skins, and it was the best way to learn because I had an expert right there on the screen teaching me exactly what to do. I was able to show her what my dye looked like, what my fibers were looking like, and she would give us all the information that we needed in order to get the results that we wanted. And she was just an awesome resource to have, and I really loved that class because it gave me a lot of confidence when it came to dyeing with natural items, and it kind of made me interested in trying out some other natural items that I could use for dyeing. I am going to be trying out a few different natural items for dyeing, not all of which are in this book. One of the things that's currently very, very much in bloom where I live on the east coast of Canada is Goldenrod. I only have a small patch in my backyard, so I'm going to be doing some foraging to get my goldenrod for my dyeing experiment. But I'm hoping in the future that I'll have enough in my backyard that I can just take from my own stash without having to go foraging. Nothing against foraging, I just want to be able to do it in my backyard so I don't have to go as far. And it's very much reaching its peak here on the east coast of Canada. But some of the other things that I'm going to be dyeing with are in this book, and one of them is in my garden. I'm going to be doing some dyeing with mint. I have two very large spearmint plants in my backyard, which my boyfriend and I planted this year. We mainly bought it because it's a wasp deterrent and we have a lot of wasps nearby, so we got it mainly to sort of get them away from us. And I don't know if it's the mint or if it's other measures that we took this year, but knock on wood, we haven't seen as many wasps, which I'm very excited about because I'm very scared of them. You get a gorgeous color with the mint. I think it's on right here. So you get this really beautiful, almost like a sea green or sea foam color. And it's just so beautiful, and I'm really, really intrigued by it. So I think that's gonna make a beautiful yarn color. And lastly, I'm gonna show you probably my favorite 2 pages in the entire book, and it's the natural color palette. So I love this because it shows me all the different colors that I can get using the dyes that Sasha uses in this book, and then see how they're affected by different mordants. So for example, I'm dyeing with mint, which is this one right here. Now the first one is just mint by itself. Mint dyeing on a material with no mordant, nothing to affix it or anything like that. The second image is mint with an alum mordant, which is a special type of mordant. The third one is alum and iron. And then the fourth one is just iron. So you can see this sort of gradation of color that you get using just one dye material and different mordants. So I really love this particular page as a resource, as a new dyer, new plant dyer. And it really sort of gets me inspired to want to experiment and play around with color. So if you want to get started with plant dyeing, I recommend this book. I really like this book. And of course, the Modern Natural Dyer is another really great resource. I found this one first at my public library, and then I bought my own copy. So if you just want to see what natural dyeing is like but don't want to invest in it yet, check your local library. They might have a copy. I think I will take a break now, and better late than never, I will show you my mug of the episode. Today I am using, I like to call this my cat in a teacup mug. This is a very special mug to me because there used to be a place here in Nova Scotia called Clay Cafe where you could paint clay items and then they would fire them and glaze them for you, and you would pick them up about a week later and you would have this beautiful creation. And it was always a really fun outing to do with family or friends, and in the case of this mug, a date night. So I painted this when I went on my second date with my boyfriend, Doyle, and I loved being able to do something creative, and it was really fun to have an activity date. And I kind of suggested it so that I knew there would be a third date because I offered to pick up the items that we painted so that he would have to see me again in order to get his item. So I painted mine with a cat sitting in a mug, and then if I just tilt the mug down, you can see that I painted the inside black with these two little ears popping up, so it looks like there's a cat sitting in the mug. And of course I painted it blue with blue speckles because my favorite color is blue. Oh, of course, cheers, right. Today I'm drinking some Fresca because it is hot out. I could not have a tea right now. So now on to some yarn. These are some new acquisitions that I purchased specifically for dyeing. I did mention in my first podcast episode that I am trying to control my stash. I don't bring in a lot of yarn unless I'm buying it for a specific purpose. And this was yarn that I bought for a specific purpose. So I have two different types of bare yarn to show you. I think I'll start with these gorgeous floofers right here. And I call them that because the name of the yarn is Floof. So these two skeins of yarn are by Fleece Artist, which I love Fleece Artist. Fleece Artist is a local yarn company here in Nova Scotia. It's technically three companies in one because it's Fleece Artist, Handmaiden, and Mineville Wool Project. So those are three tiers within the single company. So Handmaiden is the top tier, Fleece Artist is the middle tier, and Mineville Wool Project is the third tier. And it just depends on quality of the wool and the price of the wool. So the Fleece Artist is the mid-range one. But depending on what you get and what the fibers are, it can still be a little pricey. So these ones here are, like I mentioned, Floof. It is 100% merino wool, single ply, super bulky yarn. I have two because I'm going to be dyeing these two different colors. My goal is to dye one of them with Goldenrod and make a beautiful deep yellow. And my goal with the other one is to dye a green. And I kind of want more of a deep green. I might wait till I dye it to tell you what I'm gonna make, or I might tell you now. I think I'll tell you now. This yarn I'm super excited about because I'm gonna be making some matching hats for my boyfriend and I. And they're not going to be exactly the same, so we won't look identical, but I think it's going to be really sweet because mine is going to be yellow as the main color and then the dark green as the accent color. And for his, I'm going to make green the main color and yellow the accent color because he has green eyes. So anytime he wears green, he looks gorgeous. Well, of course he looks gorgeous anytime, but especially when he's wearing green. And oh right, the pattern I'm going to use the Lotus Blossom Beanie. I think that's what it's called. I'll pop a picture of it here, and I'll of course include the information down below. I'm blanking on the designer's name right now, but I will share that down below. So it's a beautiful hat made with, you can use either bulky yarn or super bulky yarn. I think she has two versions. Anyway, I'm going to do the super bulky version because of course I bought some super bulky yarn, and I'm very, very excited to see the two plant colors play together, the yellow and the green. So this is the second yarn that I bought. As I mentioned before, I was getting interested in plant-based fibers, and I had a lack of plant-based fibers in my stash. So I was on the look for something that was plant-based. And because I've started working with linen, and I have been very impressed with the linen so far, I saw this yarn and I thought, you know what? I think I want to try that one. This is by Malabrigo Yarns. Their yarns are beautiful. They are a bit on the pricier side, but their yarns are just, oh, they're gorgeous. So I bought 2 skeins of their Susuro yarn. That's that right there. And of course they are undyed, so they're in the color natural. And this one is a DK or sport weight yarn. I guess it depends on what gauge you're working with. It is a single ply yarn. It is 50% mulberry silk, 25% merino wool, and 25% linen. So it's not a full plant-based fiber. It does have the strength of the merino, but it is 75% plant-based fiber. So I thought, you know what? I think that's still going to be a really fun fiber to dye with. I think it's going to be a great fiber to work with and to create a warm weather garment, because that's what I'm buying these for. I wanted to make a top, but I don't have an exact pattern in mind yet. I just know that I want it to be a top. Maybe a t-shirt, maybe a sleeveless top. I will see what's out there when I'm ready to work with it. Very, very excited to see how these yarns are going to work. So I have my colors picked out for the floof, but I don't quite know what color I want to dye this one. I've got a few ideas in my head. I'm gonna try and pick a color that I don't necessarily have in my wardrobe already, because I want to have a new top to add to my collection of things that I can wear when I'm going out or going to work, that type of thing. I'm thinking more of like a pale minty green using the spearmint. I'm gonna play around with my spare yarn that I have, that I'm gonna try different colors, do some experiments, and then I'm gonna do my full-on nice skeins. Good morning, welcome to my backyard. I did want to film down in that corner. However, the mosquitoes had a different idea, and I have got bites all around my ankles and the backs of my legs. So I am up here in the safety of the deck to film this little intro segment. So I mentioned that I was doing the 2 skeins of Fleece Artist Floof, and I wanted to do a yellow and a green. So in my research, I came across a video by Last Minute Laura, who is a Canadian crocheter, dyer, YouTuber, clearly, and she does a lot of dyeing experiment videos with natural products. I've learned a lot from her videos, and I stumbled upon one that she did using Black-Eyed Susans. So I, before now, did not have any Black-Eyed Susans in my yard. I have some now. Sorry. Lots of cars going by. I'm outside. I don't really have any way of dampening the noise. Hopefully it's not too bad. So before now, I didn't have any Black-Eyed Susans in my yard. And I was doing some research trying to find where in Nova Scotia to find Black-Eyed Susans. And luckily they are in bloom right now. They bloom from about late summer to early October. And Doyle had the great idea of suggesting to me that I reach out to our community group. We have a community group on Facebook, and asking if anyone had any in their yard that they didn't want or that they wouldn't mind if I took some from. And maybe 10 minutes after I put my post up, a really great neighbor who only lives 2 or 3 streets away from us said, "I have tons, you are welcome to it." So later that day we went out and I got to pick some. I just cut off the heads of the flowers. That's all you need for the dyeing. but she also had a lot of it, and she didn't want that much in her garden. So they have a very shallow root system, so she just pulled some right out of the ground for me, and I took them home as transplants. And as you can see back in my yard, I planted some. So next year I'm gonna have my own black-eyed Susans that I can use for dyeing and just to enjoy, because they're really beautiful. I like them because they look like miniature sunflowers, and I love sunflowers. They're just beautiful, beautiful flowers. So I'm gonna be using black-eyed Susans with an iron mordant to, fingers crossed, make a really dark army green. Very, very excited to see how that turns out. And I guess I'm gonna get dyeing. Welcome to my backyard. It is going to be noisy. There is nothing I can do about that, but as I will show you in a minute, I have to be outside for this. So I'm about to do my dyeing with Goldenrod. I'm not actually doing this as a step-by-step, this is how you dye with it. It's just, I'm dyeing with Goldenrod for the first time, and I'm taking you along with me. So, like I mentioned, I foraged this from my backyard, and I learned very quickly that Goldenrod is full of bugs. And that is why we are outside, because I do not want any of these bugs in my house. I figured this would also be a great time to bring you out into my backyard because it's a beautiful August day. It's evening at this point, so it's not so hot anymore. It was quite hot earlier. And I'm ready to dye. So I'll just give you a sneak peek. This is the goldenrod that I was able to forage. I got quite a lot of it, so this is a fair bit. I'm kind of going off what Cabin Boy Knits did in his video as sort of a recommendation of how much goldenrod to use per amount of yarn. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to plop my goldenrod into my pot. And I've got exactly the amount that Cabin Boy Knits recommended. Like I mentioned before, I will link his video in my show notes so that you can go watch it. So now, because I'm outside, this is my water source. So I'm just gonna fill this up. This is just plain water from the hose. If I was inside, I would have just used tap water. I live on a well. Our water's just normal water. As I've filled this with water, I'm noticing all of the bugs coming to the top, and I'm just trying to kill them very quickly. It's kind of grossing me out a bit how many bugs there are, which is why, like I mentioned before, I'm doing this only outside. And honestly, unless this turns out really, really beautiful, I probably won't do it again. I'm not a bug person. And I'm just going to get it going and simmering. That was something really important that he mentioned in the video, is that you never want to boil the goldenrod, otherwise you'll get a rusty brownish color. You won't get the beautiful golden yellow. Now, it's just out of frame, but I have another pot here that I'm going to use to soak my yarn. I'm not going to do anything special with it now. I'm not going to pre-mordant it. I am going to add the mordant to the goldenrod dye bath when I'm ready to do the yarn. This needs to simmer for, I'm gonna do it for about an hour and see if I like that color at that time. Hopefully that will be all the time that I need, because of course I'm outside, daylight is fading. Not yet, daylight's still pretty good now, but it is going to be fading, and I wanna make sure that I can do everything that I need with the physical goldenrod while it's still light out. And then once I've strained out the goldenrod and I just have that liquid left, then I can bring it back inside, because I don't have to worry about the bugs anymore, because they'll all be dead and strained out. That's my plan. So I've just got my floof here. Because I bought this in a hank already, it already has some good ties on it, and I'm not worried about needing to put anything else around it. I'm just putting it in like this, and my little tiny tester skein. So I'm just gonna put these in the pot and fill them up with my hose. Now you may not know this from if you haven't dyed before, but in all of my research that I've done with dyeing, the point of pre-soaking the yarn is to get all the air bubbles out of the yarn by getting it all wet, so that it will really absorb all of the dye that you're putting into it. And obviously you can't see it because it's down below, but I'm just squeezing all the air out of the yarn so that it will be fully absorbed with water when I go to put it in the dye bath later. And hopefully it will absorb all that beautiful goldenrod color. One important tip when you are pre-soaking your yarn is to never use warm water. You always want to use either lukewarm or cooler because you don't want your yarn to felt in the hot water. So this has been simmering for probably about an hour, and it is still quite warm, but I do want to give you an update on what the color looks like because I'm really happy with it. Get that out of the way. It is quite hot, so I won't take too much, but it's starting to get that beautiful golden color, and I'm really happy with this. This is what I was going for. Let's get that back in there. And I think now I'm going to reduce my temperature. And once this cools down a bit more, I'm going to strain out the material. Actually, I'll just shut it off so that it can cool down, but I'm going to drain my material and then I'm going to put my yarn inside. Very exciting. Okay, I am back, and as you can see, it's getting quite dark out. Normally I would have these beautiful string lights on, but unfortunately I needed to use the outside plug to have my my burner on, as well as I now have a light source. Hopefully it's strong enough. It is quite dark, the moon is out, all of the light's going to be gone very soon, so I'm going to try and wrap this up as quickly as I can and bring this inside so that I can finish the dye process inside now that I've strained out all the goldenrod and all the dead bugs. There was a lot, but it's okay, it's all good now. In order to use most natural dyes, you need to use a mordant, and I'm going to be using alum mordant. This is from Vibrant Acres Farm, and I also need to use some cream of tartar, just your basic from the grocery store cream of tartar. I'm just going to take some of the dye bath into a mason jar, maybe a bit less than that. Just taking a little bit. I'm going to just pour the alum into that. Cover it with a lid. I'm just going to shake it up a bit. So like Cabin Boy Knit said, make sure it's already a little bit cool because I don't want to burn my fingers. Want to be able to hold it so I can shake it really good. And just make sure it looks pretty clear. It does. So I'm just going to take off that lid and pour that into my dye bath. I'm just going to... Now, you can't tell this because you're just watching my video, but I don't love the smell of this. It's very medicinal, which, you know, Cabin Boy Knits loves the smell. I don't really, but that's okay. And next I'm going to do my cream of tartar. Now, unfortunately, right now, all the mosquitoes are coming out because I live in an area that has mosquitoes. So I'm going to try and wrap this up very quickly. Again, I'm just going to mix it up, get the mosquitoes off my legs while I'm doing that. nice and mixed. You might be able to hear my cats in the background. They want to be outside even though they are all indoor cats. They don't know, they can't survive out here. All right, that looks pretty well mixed. So again, pour that into the dye bath. All right, so now that my dye bath is all ready to go, I'm gonna take things back inside where there are no mosquitoes, but before I do that, I'm going to do my little tester just to make sure this is going to be a good color. So I'm just going to dip it in and sort of swish it around. Obviously this won't be, you know, a super strong representation of the color because it needs to sit and steep for a while in order to get the good color. So let's just get, and I absolutely love that. Let's see if I can bring it a little closer. That is pretty cool. So my light source is just making this look quite bright, but it is sort of like, at the moment, a dark lemon yellow, almost that perfect goldenrod color. So I'm happy with that. So I'm gonna put my good yarn in and I'm gonna steep this sucker and I'm gonna get that beautiful golden yellow color. That is going to be beautiful. So that's my segment on dyeing with goldenrod. I am going to show you the final colors once I have everything dyed, and I do have some more things that I'm going to dye. So I will record those when I do them, and hopefully I won't be stuck filming at night outside where the bugs can get me. But welcome to my kitchen. I'm getting ready to dye with my black-eyed Susans. So I've got my pot all ready to go. I've got my flowers, water, yarn, everything that I need. Like I mentioned in my little intro, I'm going to be following Last Minute Laura's video tutorial about how to dye with these. I'm just going to follow what she recommended, and she just used a basket full of the, whoops, she just used a basket full of black-eyed Susans, and judging by how big her basket was in the video, I think I have about the same amount. So I'm just going to plop those into, oops, into my pot that I keep banging, sorry. Put that off to the side. And I'm just going to top these off with just some tap water. Like I mentioned in my previous section on when I dyed with the goldenrod, I'm just using tap water, and we live on a well, so nothing fancy about it. In my pot, my water comes out probably about 2/3 up the pot. And I've got all my beautiful flowers ready to steep and give me a beautiful dye. So I'm just gonna get this covered and get my temperature going. And while that gets off to a start, I'm going to soak my yarn. So because I'm inside and I can sort of show things to you a bit more, I am going to sort of give you a better idea of how I get my yarn ready to dye. So I'm just gonna plop this in there. It does kind of take up most of the room in the container, but once I add the water and I start squishing it down, it'll take up a little less room because the air is going to come out of the yarn. I've got my little tester to go in there as well. I'll show you right here. The yarn has floated above the water because it is full of air, but I'm going to squeeze out all that air. You might be able to hear the bubbles. Something important to note when you are working with yarn and dyeing with it, anytime the yarn is wet, you want to be very careful not to agitate your yarn too much because that will encourage felting. So you just have to be very careful. You don't want to rub things like you would if you were washing something. You just want to gently squeeze. So I have almost all the air bubbles out now, so I'll just show you how different it looks from a second ago. So before, the yarn was floating on top of the water. Now it's fully submerged in the water. And I'm actually just going to top that up because I want all the yarn to be fully submerged. As you can see, I just have some more water so that the yarn is fully submerged and it is soaking up nicely. So in her video, Last Minute Laura does a pre-mordant using iron. Now that is new to me. I have not done that before, but I want to get the same color as her, so I'm gonna do it. So I am just soaking my yarn in plain water right now, but I'm gonna follow her instructions for pre-mordanting with iron, using my tester swatch first to make sure that I'm not gonna ruin my good yarn. And that's gonna be another pot that I'm gonna have here on the stove ready to go. So, okay, I am back. I have had my Black-Eyed Susan steeping for quite a while now on a low heat. And after I got them in the pot and had them steeping for a while, I did a little bit more research about dyeing with them, and I found a new YouTuber that I hadn't seen before who also did an experiment of dyeing with Black-Eyed Susans. Her channel is called Textile Indie, and she did a dyeing experiment with Black-Eyed Susans using an alum mordant, and she got a really nice color, so it made me curious to see what that would look like. So as my Black-Eyed Susans have been steeping, I did an alum pre-mordant and an iron pre-mordant with my little testers. I made up a new tester to make the alum one because, as I showed you before, I only had the one. So I have my two testers here. I'll give you an idea of what they look like. I was expecting to get a similar color because Textile Indie got quite a dark olive green with hers using an alum mordant, and mine didn't turn out that way at all. But my iron mordant turned out exactly the way I wanted. So I have my testers right here. And this one is my alum. So it's got more of like a, I want to say like a lichen green, or like it's a very yellowish green. And so that was the alum mordant. And this is with the iron mordant. And this is the color that I was trying to get. I was trying to get this really dark olive green. And this one was with the iron. So very, very happy with the iron mordant test. So I'm going to go ahead and mordant my proper fiber using my iron bath that I had already started. And if I can, I'll just try and lift this up to show you. It's kind of like this dark brown color. So in her video, Last Minute Laura used an iron solution that she made herself, and hers was a liquid iron mordant, and I had the iron crystals. Mine is from Vibrant Acres. That's the farm that I was mentioning. That's just in Berwick, Nova Scotia. And I was able to order some of this from them. So I dissolved a little bit of that into a big pot of water. In my research, I learned that you can use anywhere from 1 to 3% of the iron crystals per weight of fiber. Probably let this steep in the iron mordant for about half an hour, and then I'm going to put it into what will then be my strained dye bath. So I'll take out all the little flowers and the petals and everything, and I'll let this sit in the Black Eyed Susan bath, the dye bath, for probably about an hour. That's kind of generally what I've seen online as a good amount of time. But of course I'll keep checking on it, take it out when I'm happy with the color. Back again, I have strained the Black Eyed Susans from my dye bath, and I have mordanted my fiber that I'm going to use. And now it's time to put it in the pot. So, just want to give you a good look. This is what the iron mordanted yarn looks like. So it does have this, like, I would say this is almost like a mushroom brown color to it. So it did take on a lot of the iron. When I pulled it out of the iron mordant bath, it was very dark. It was almost like a chocolate brown, but you do need to wash it after you mordant it so that you can get the excess iron out of the yarn before you go to dye it. So that's what I did, and it did go back to a lighter brown, but as you can see, it is no longer some white wool. And my dye bath looks almost like coffee. It's very, let me just give it a stir. It's very much like a chocolate brown, coffee color with some hints of, I want to say like a reddish color. Let me see if I can hold it up to the camera. Probably not, but it's, oh, there we go, just a little bit. See, it's very, very dark. So there is, it's funny how this is going to create a dark olive green, but as you saw with my tester swatch, it does work. When I was watching videos about dyeing with Black Eyed Susans, it said at the beginning it does look almost like a pinkish brown color, and it's not until it's sat there for about 15 minutes that you'll start to see the green emerge. So we're gonna put this sucker in and start the dyeing process. I am back again, and I am ready for dye experiment number 3. So as I said in my introduction, I knew what I wanted to do color-wise for the Fleece Artist Floof, but I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do with the Malabrigo Sussurro. I think I mentioned in my introduction that I was looking to get a color that I don't already have in my wardrobe, and one of my options was a light minty green. And how do you make a light minty green, you might wonder? With some mint. This is some mint that I took from our garden, and sadly for Doyle's Gin and Tonics, I took most of the mint in our garden. I did leave a few small ones that are still continuing to grow, but because of the amount of yarn that I want to dye, I needed a lot of mint. I am actually following a recipe directly from Sasha Duer's book, Natural Color, like I mentioned before. And this is her recipe for dyeing with mint. She dyes some raw silk to make a table runner and napkins. It turned out really, really nice. And I figured this would be a good one for me to try because my Sussurro yarn is 50% mulberry silk. So I'm expecting to get, or not expecting, rather hoping to get a similar color with my yarn, following her recipe. So to get that started, I had to get some mint from my garden, and then I just have to fill it up with water, steep it like I've been doing my other dye materials, and then work with some mordants to get a specific color. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that started, and I will come back when I have reached the next step in the dye process. So I've got my mint steeping right now, and probably the best side effect of working with mint for dyeing is that it smells amazing. The whole house is gonna smell like mint, and I love that smell. So very excited after doing the two more earthy, botanical, medicinal dyes. It's gonna be really nice to fill the house with a nice smelling dye, especially because it's gonna help clear out those other smells from the kitchen. So now that I've got that steeping, I'm going to prep my yarn. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just gonna soak it in water like I did the others. I don't want to pre-mordant this. I'm going to use the mordant in the dye bath like I did for the Goldenrod. So because this yarn is finer and it's silk, so it can be quite delicate, I just put the hanks on some tie wraps, or wire ties, you might know them as. And again, I have my little tester swatch. So these are just going in the water, getting all that air out so that they're gonna be ready to dye. Okay, I'm back again, and I have steeped my mint leaves and added my mordants, and I'm ready to try testing my little tester swatch. So here we go, brave little tester. Let's see what we get. Does look like it is a bit of a minty green. Let's see if I can just squeeze some water out. So it doesn't have a lot of color to it. Oh, it shows up better on camera than I can see it in person. So it is more of like a sagey green. I am happy with my tester. So now it is time to dye the yarn. I'm just gonna put them up and just slowly dip them in. I'm probably gonna leave them in this dye bath for a bit of time just so that they can take on a fair bit of color. I'm gonna let that sit and simmer for a little while. Hello, it's been a couple days and my yarn has completely dried, so it's time for the color reveal. First, I'll show you the Goldenrod. This turned out perfectly. I'm so happy with this color. It's identical to a goldenrod plant. That's the best way to describe it. It's just this beautiful bright golden yellow. It's a very even dye. The yarn still has its softness to it, and I'm really happy with it. I just think it turned out even better than I was expecting, and I was expecting it to be pretty nice. So I'm just thrilled with that. And I know I mentioned earlier in my segment where I was dyeing with the Goldenrod that I didn't love that it was really buggy and that it had a very medicinal smell to it, but oh man, this color is worth it. And to go with it, I have my Black Eyed Susan color, which is not what I expected. Based on Last Minute Laura's video, dyeing with Black Eyed Susans, and based on my little tester swatch, I thought it was going to be a dark olive green, but I must have, I must need my eyes checked, because that tester looks almost the same as the full skein. The tester is a little bit greener, but only by a tiny bit, so I guess my Black Eyed Susans just didn't want to release any green this time around. I will say though, it's a really beautiful chocolate brown. And even though it's not dark green, these colors look really nice together. even though it's not what I planned, I still think it's gonna make really nice hats, and I'm happy with it overall. So those were my first two. Now my last reveal is the mint that I dyed with the Cicero yarn, and my result that I got reminded me that when you're dyeing with natural dyeing agents, you can hope for a certain color, but it's also likely that you won't get that color, and you just have to roll with it and accept what you get, because natural dyeing products are very fickle and they will just do what they want to do. There could be any number of reasons why you don't get the color that you expect. It could be the pH level of your water. It could be that you didn't fully clean your dye material, so there was dirt and that affected the color. It could be temperature. Temperature is a really big one. Could be the mordants that you used interacting with the color, any number of reasons. So for me, I did not get that beautiful blue-green that I was hoping for, but I did get quite a nice pale green. This color reminds me of celery, so if it was a colorway, even though it's dyed with mint, I would call it celery. So it did do a pretty solid dye job too. In my introduction, I was talking about how I expected it to do an uneven color because of the different fiber types, but in the end, it dyed pretty solidly. So that was kind of a surprise. Not a bad surprise, it was a good surprise. I'm getting more into solid colors. And even though it's not the blue-green that I was hoping for, I think it's a pretty nice color. I'm not entirely sure if I want to keep it. Oh, you might see my cat behind me. It looks like he might jump onto my lap. So one of the, hi, you coming over? Hi. This is Bennett. He's my kitty. He's the one that's featured in the intro video to, or sorry, the intro to my videos. You're not gonna stick around? Where are you going? I guess I'll just have to move over here to show you the yarn. So I have a theory about why the color turned out greener than I was hoping based on the recipe that I was following. So like I mentioned in the segment where I was dyeing with mint, I was using a recipe right out of Natural Color, and in that recipe, Sasha only says that she uses mint. She didn't specify any sort of type of mint, and I specifically used spearmint because that's what I had growing in my garden. And I was thinking about it after I dyed this and it turned out more green than blue. I was thinking about how companies package products, like specifically gum and mints, that are mint flavored. And anytime that it's branded as spearmint, the packaging is green. Anytime it's labeled as peppermint, the package is blue. And I'm sort of wondering if maybe that, in a roundabout way, relates to colors in the product, in the plant. Is the peppermint plant a bluer green than the spearmint plant? I don't know. I don't have any peppermint, so I can't compare it. But it does make me really interested in, you know, maybe giving this another go at some point and seeing if that yields a different result. But for now, I'm relatively happy with this green. It's not a color that I would typically choose for myself. I think it's a little too light, but it's not terrible. So I think what I'm gonna do is I am going to knit something up with this and see a larger swatch of the color next to my skin. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm gonna make a top with this. And if I don't like it then, I have some commercial dye that I can use to over dye this. When this was drying, I honestly didn't really like the color, but seeing it in the different light and sort of, you know, holding it up and getting a good look at it, I like it a bit more than I did when it was just laying down drying. So, but that's the fun thing about natural dyeing. It doesn't always give you what you expect, and you just have to roll with that. So those are my 3 yarns that I dyed using natural products: Goldenrod, Black Eyed Susans, and Mint. Thank you so much for coming along with me on this dyeing experiment. I do have my regular segment about what I'm currently reading, which I will pop in here. One thing I wanted to talk about, and that is, of course, my book that I'm currently reading. At the time of recording, I'm reading this at the time of recording. I will probably be finished this tonight. So by the time this video comes out, I will have long finished this book. But it is my current read, and I love it, so I definitely want to share it. It's called Maiden Voyages: Women in the Golden Age of Transatlantic Travel by Sian Evans. This book is all about women who traveled on the great ocean liners between those 2 periods, and a little bit before, because of course she talks about the Titanic. But it's really interesting because she talks about the roles that women had when they worked on these ocean liners, as well as the women that were traveling either for leisure and pleasure, which is her own phrase. So those would be the women staying in first class, who had all the amenities, who were quite wealthy women, Hollywood stars, etc. And then, of course, the women who were traveling in third class, trying to make a better life for themselves in the New World, in America or in Canada. And I love it because it just talks about such a variety of women and the places that they held in society. Of course, there's also some really fun images of the women and of the ocean liners. It profiles a few women in depth because they had pretty long careers in the ocean liner industry. It also talks about women who worked as nurses on hospital ships during the First World War. And I've just finished the section, or I'm just in the section right now talking about women who worked during the Second World War. So of course this now talks about the Wrens, the women in the Royal Navy. And I'm very enthralled by all of these stories about these incredible women. Naturally, I'm a feminist, so I love reading stories about strong women and about women who broke barriers and just wanted a life of adventure. So they took a chance and they got on a boat. Anyway, I'm almost finished this book, but I highly recommend it. I'm very much enjoying it. It's an easy read. I know a lot of people are put off by nonfiction books because they think they're going to be very dry. They think they're going to be difficult to read, but this is very much an easy reading nonfiction book. And even though I work in a library and I do a lot of reading, I'm also of the opinion that I don't want to read a nonfiction book if it's too dry. I like nonfiction that reads like fiction, so storytelling nonfiction. And of course, reading all of these incredible stories of these amazing women was a really fun read. So that is my current read, Maiden Voyages by Sian Evans. I highly recommend this book, and of course let me know if you pick up any of the books that I recommend in my podcast. I get really excited when I see people saying, oh, I'm definitely going to check out that book that you recommended. It sounds really cool. And I love helping friends and family and now my lovely viewers find their next great book. So yeah, that is the book of this episode. And that brings me to the end of this special episode of Knitted by Whitney. Thank you so much for coming back if you're a repeat viewer. Thank you so much for taking a chance on watching my podcast if you're new. And nothing else to say except take care. Bye.